because I have no right to not be anything less than excellent, because everything that they sacrificed and everything that they fought for gave me these opportunities. And I'm very aware of that. So the idea that any single person could come along and knock me down would just be an affront to them. And I can't do that.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. My next guest has over 3 decades of experience as a sports and entertainment executive. She has worked with some of the most respected global brands in the industry. I'm talking about NBA, Golf Channel, where, by the way, she was employee number 13, NBCUniversal and Fox Sports. Jené Elzie, Chief Growth Officer for Athletes First Partners, is incredible. Before we jump into our conversation, I want to share some of her background with you. If you're not familiar with Athletes First Partners, they are a sales and marketing agency which represents sports properties, including the National Basketball Players Association, the National Basketball Retired Players Association, and the U.S. Olympics and Paralympic Committee. Jené is charged with driving global growth of the company, including brand growth, expansion of the client base, and diversification of revenue streams. Incredible, right? She also served as Vice President of International Marketing for the NBA, where she developed and oversaw the league's marketing endeavors all outside of the U.S. Jené has also served in a variety of senior roles across media. We're talking Vice President of Commercial Development for the NBCUniversal International Television Distribution Group, Vice President of International Sales and Strategic Planning for Comcast International, Think E, Style Network, Golf Channel, and also she's a Vice President of Programming and Acquisitions at the Tennis Channel. Okay, now that we're on the same page, I can't wait for you to listen to our conversation. Jené gets candid and tells us what it was like to sometimes be the only Black woman in the room. She shares her approach to dealing with it and gives some incredible advice, some that gave me the chills. We also talk about a new term I just learned, Introprenuer. You don't want to miss what it is, because you just might be one and not even know it. Jené also gives us some great advice on implementing change within your organization. She talks about 3 things that you 100% must do in order to see success. All right, friends, let's do this. Jené, welcome to the Game of Her Own. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Your career is incredible and your experience is incredible. But before we dive in, take us back in time and tell us when you first fell in love with sports.
That would have had to have been when I was about 2 or 3 years old, for a couple of reasons. One is, as a child, I just apparently had huge amounts of energy. I was flipping off of couches, I was bouncing around the house, I was running off of walls. So my parents put me into a kinder gym class, which was basically allowing me the same thing to do, but I was doing it in a space with other kids and really having a lot of fun. So that actually developed into a full-blown career for me, which was gymnastics. I was a gymnast really from the time I was 3, started competing at around 8 years old, and then did it all the way until I graduated college at 22. So it really was my life. In addition to that, I spent every single Sunday watching NFL, my favorite team, the San Francisco 49ers, with my dad. So we definitely bonded over sports. I was a fan of every Bay Area sports team for as long as I can remember. So it's always really been a part of my life.
How is that competing at 8 years old?
My whole philosophy on why you start a sport like gymnastics at such a young age is by the time you actually get to the point where you realize it's a pretty dangerous sport. You've been doing it for so long, and when you're young, you bounce back pretty quickly. So I remember being very nervous on balance beam. That was my first memory of competing, my very first meet. But I also remember the exhilaration of getting through it, and also then going to floor exercise. And I love dancing. I love performing. So for the most part, it was fun for me. I had nerves for sure in the beginning, but then you kind of get used to it.
How did you, at 8 years old, deal with your nerves and your nervousness?
I think it took a while. It took several years to figure out how to deal with it. Certainly part of coaching, back then people didn't really talk about the mental part of the game, but we did learn, through repetition. You would get up there and you would do 20, 30 balance beam routines in one session. And so you got to the point where, in theory, you were supposed to be so confident that by the time you got to the actual meet, you were able to overcome your nervousness. That didn't happen for everyone. Some people were really good at training and some people were really good at competition. I was definitely more on the gamer side. Like I would show up on game day, and it was easier for me to kind of control my nerves, but it took a long, long time. I don't think until I was probably well into high school before I felt confident enough to get up there and be reasonably sure I was going to hit my routine. I still fell as much as any gymnast does, but it definitely developed over time.
When did you realize you wanted to work in sports?
Well, that actually happened. Gymnastics had a little bit of a part to play. So the summer of my junior year of college, all of my friends, everybody was applying to internships. And I was applying to, pretty standard internships. I really wasn't thinking about long-term what I wanted to do. I knew the things that I liked. I really enjoyed business. I enjoyed organizational design and thinking, but I didn't know how that was going to play out. And so my roommate at the time, she came to me and she said, "Hey, I got this application for an internship. Really doesn't fit me. I'm not really into sports, but this might be great for you." And so it was an application to join the U.S. Olympic Committee. At the time, the U.S. Olympic Committee, now the Paralympic Committee, in Colorado Springs. And they had this really selective internship program that was, I think there were maybe 20 of us, and they had over 1,000 applicants. It was a really competitive program. So I applied kind of on a lark, and I ended up getting it. And it was the most incredible few months of my life. I was actually also training at the training center. So I got kind of the best of both worlds then.
Wait, so you
went from there.
That's insane. Okay, so the fact that your roommate at the time came in and said, like, this isn't for me, but it sounds like it might be for you. Like, otherwise,
yes,
you wouldn't have heard of it.
I would not be in sports, I don't think.
Wow.
Because it wasn't a dream of. I actually had no idea a person could have a career in sports. It just didn't occur to me. I grew up in the Bay Area. I was in Silicon Valley at the time, and so that was right around the first .com boom. So everybody that left school was working at these weirdly named startups. We didn't even know what startups were at the time. We just knew that you could roll into the office in sweats. So we thought it sounded cool. So I thought maybe I'll do that, or maybe I'll do something more traditional, but never in a million years thought that sports, I could actually make a career of it.
And so you said you were training at the same time. So you were still competing.
Yeah, I competed all the way through my senior year of college.
Ooh, yes. And I read that you were an All-American and a 3-time captain. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh, how did you balance that and your internship for the Olympics? And at that point, were you like, I have a shot at going to the Olympics as well?
Well, first of all, at that time, the time I was doing gymnastics, basically by the time you were 16, you were kind of considered in the, hitting your peak. And so it was rare for gymnasts to continue at a high level through college. You had, collegiate gymnasts that kind of really focused on both the academic and the athletic side. Because if you're, at that time, the belief was if you're going to train for the Olympics, you're going to stop out of school. Thankfully, that's not the case anymore today, but it certainly was the choice at the time. And I come from, two parents who were very, very big believers in education. So I don't think it was even an option for me, for me at that point.
Yes. So you're at, for everyone who doesn't know, you're going to Stanford at the time. And so that's where you got your undergrad and your graduate degree. I can't imagine stopping like Stanford. I can't imagine what your parents would have done if you said that you were going to stop going.
Yeah, I don't think I would have even fixed my head to think that.
Yeah.
They would hear it.
Yeah. Yes. Same. My parents are the same exact way. That's so funny.
Yep.
So yeah, tell us more how you balance that. I just can't imagine that both things are really intense.
I will say the one benefit for me for doing gymnastics all those years before going to college is I always had to balance. And so I would have, 2-a-day training sessions. So we'd get up, we'd have, morning training, then I'd go to school, then after school, I'd go straight into the car, eat my lunch or dinner in the car, go to practice from 5 to 9 every night, and then have my dinner and do my homework in the car on the way back home. So by the time I got to college, it was actually, to me, it was much more manageable because our training were a set number of hours a week. We had a much more sort of regimented, I'm a regimented person by nature. And so it all made sense to me. And in fact, the year that was the most difficult for me was my graduate year. So I did an additional year at Stanford for my master's degree. And I found that very, very difficult because I didn't have gymnastics and I didn't have somewhere to be every morning at 7 o'clock and every day at 3 o'clock. It didn't exist. And so I got distracted. It was harder for me to focus because I didn't have all of those things.
I had this this moment of clarity when I was yes, that's why it was so hard for me to work and not be busy. And I wanted to be busy all the time. And I liked that structure.
Yeah.
I played soccer all through school, then and through college. And then I went to get my master's. And so I was like, okay, what else do I have to do?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to coach soccer because, I'm not Mia Hamm and I'm no longer playing. So I will coach soccer. And then after that, it was okay, well, I have 2 jobs. Perfect. Okay. Yep. And then after that, when I became full-time, I worked like crazy.
Yeah.
And I liked being that busy because I was able to thrive in that setting. And I just feel like I just had this moment of clarity, oh, that's why I was like that. Okay.
I think that is that's what a lot of people don't understand about athletes is that you live your life with a certain level of structure. And it can be really challenging once you leave that world to go back to find that kind of structure again. So you have to create it, or it has to be inherent in the type of job or the type of career that you have. So I've always been a multitasker. I've always been better when I have a million things to do than when I just have one thing to focus on.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you. I just feel like we had a therapy session. You can send me your bill. That was really helpful. Okay. Tell everybody what you do now and who you do it for.
Sure. So I am currently Chief Growth Officer at Athletes First Partners. We are a sports marketing agency. We're based in New York. We focus on 3 lines of business: sports sponsorship, group marketing, or NIL, as a lot of people call it these days, and property consulting. And so I look after 3 specific lines of business. I look after our international business. I spent probably 2/3 of my career in international, so I look after that part of the business, our marketing and brand strategy, and then also our consulting division.
Ooh, that's a big job.
Well, it brings a little bit of all of my former jobs kind of together. So I really enjoy it.
Okay, talk about your former jobs, and then we'll come back to your current job. So talk about your former jobs and how it prepared you for what you're doing now.
The way that I think about my career is probably in 3 different sections. And I actually was not a person that kind of specialized in one thing and did that for my entire career. So I actually started out on the content side of the business. So I started out at Fox Sports. I was buying property rights, buying sports rights. So everything from boxing, my first deal was actually a boxing deal, to action sports, to gymnastics, cheerleading, you name it. I was buying those programs for the Fox Sports regional channels. I did that for several years, and then I moved over to Tennis Channel, which was a startup at the time. And I was doing programming, program acquisitions, buying tennis tournament rights all over the world. That's where I started traveling quite a bit. So that was kind of the first third. The second third was really focused more on sales. So I was working for Golf Channel and E! all under the Comcast family at the time. And I was heading up international sales for them and business development. So doing things like launching golf channels in golf meccas like the Czech Republic and France and areas that, you actually wouldn't think a golf channel would launch. And then I did that for about 4 years, and then we transitioned to NBCUniversal, and that began the third part of my career, which was marketing. So I was working on a marketing solutions team for the unscripted product. So everything from the Kardashians to the Real Housewives to other sports programming from NBC Sports. I was doing the marketing, B2B marketing support for them. And then at that time, I had moved over to London. While I was living in London, which is where I lived for about 8 years, I got a call from the NBA, and they were looking for someone to build up their international marketing discipline. So it didn't really exist beforehand. So the great thing was I was able to come in with kind of a blank sheet of paper and figure out what marketing for the NBA, for international, what kind of structure that would look like. So I did that until 2018, and now I'm here.
All right, talk about the NBA. So you're coming in with a blank slate, and they're saying, like, design this, come up with the strategy and go.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, that is, I feel that, like, that's a lot of weight on your shoulders. Were you nervous? Did you encounter, a lot of us, when we get a new, we want more responsibility. And then we get it. And it's like, ooh, then come all the nerves that you forgot about, and, self-doubt or imposter syndrome. Did you have any of that?
It was interesting. In the beginning, I was hired by the NBA Europe office. So we were a team of about 50 people, I think, at the time, based in London, but covering all of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. The good news is, that was because we had such a different product. So if you think about the NBA, those games come in at 2 and 3 in the morning. So you don't have a whole lot of fans up at 2 and 3 in the morning watching anything. And so, we had to kind of take a different tact as to what the NBA experience was for Europe. And so we were able to be really flexible, try a lot of really creative different things with content, with social media. One of the things when I came in, most of the marketing strategy up to that point had been focused on grassroots events that we did around, I think, 5 different countries, primarily over the summer. And then a lot of B2B marketing, so working with broadcast partners and online partners to market the sport. And so we really focused on building up our digital expertise and having more of a direct to consumer, direct to fan relationship. So that a lot of my focus was kind of building out that part, like the digital marketing, collecting data, understanding what to do with data, understanding the fan journey. That was a really interesting time. And like I said, we were a satellite office and we sat across the ocean. So we actually had a lot of fun. We got to test everything because, as one of my bosses used to say, you can't fall off the floor. If you haven't done it before, then it's a pretty short fall. So I actually didn't feel that level of concern or imposter syndrome in the beginning. But after I had done that in Europe for about 1.5 years, my then boss at the time asked me to build that same model out for the rest of international. And so we had teams in our offices in, I think, 10 markets around the world. So a lot of then my focus shifted to kind of rebuilding that model appropriately for each regional office. So I spent a lot of time on airplanes, a lot of time, on the ground, and then just really, again, just experimenting and seeing what would work. But it certainly, as time grew, it was certainly a lot more of a pressure just understanding, okay, so now we got a little bit of it's, we're working in markets like China and the Philippines and Brazil and Mexico and all of these really amazing basketball markets. The fan base is incredible outside of the US, and it is massive. And not just in China. China is a really fantastic market, but markets like the Philippines, again, and Brazil, and a lot of these places where I had no idea what it was like, even before I started.
Okay. This is in my head. And so I'm just going to ask it. Talk about your experience, right? You're in sports, you're international, right? So talk about just your experience really as a Black woman in sports and what that was like coming up and advocating for yourself. And just, the Black experience is different for everybody, but I'd love to hear yours, especially from the international perspective.
Yeah, so I will say it was definitely an eye-opener. I do say for anybody who even has a general curiosity about any country in the world, please go. It is such an interesting experience. First of all, when I moved, I did it kind of on not a whim, but it was supposed to be an 18-month gig, and then it turned into 8 years. And my experience, I think it really taught me how, as a Black woman, I show up in the rooms that I walk into. So there are, I think I had been to 35 countries and done business in these countries. And I'm received differently in a lot of different markets. And it got to the point where I would think, okay, so how do I turn this around and use this to my advantage? And one of the ways to do that was, you catch people on the back foot, and you walk in, and I'm going in to negotiate a deal, and they're a little bit taken aback, and then I will make a connection, find some way to make a connection, and then you kind of learn from there. It's such a relationship business, and so I would always go in thinking, how do I connect with this person? Because that's all this is, right? That's all a lot of the business, the type of business that I did. That's a lot of what it is getting past seeing what's on the surface. And so I definitely experienced some really challenging times. I definitely experienced some really good times. There were places that I thought I was going to have problems that I didn't. And there were places that I thought I was going to be accepted, and I didn't. And so I think it just taught me to have an incredible amount of resiliency, because I've always felt that I love being a Black woman, and I've always felt like, how do I make sure that I can show up in the best way possible and not feel like I had to apologize for it or be intimidated by it. I think before I moved to London and really had experience in international. I think if I had not done that, I wouldn't have any idea what it's like to kind of experience different things with different people and speak different languages, not literally, but really kind of understand what is such a big problem right now, and like such a big disconnect. And so much of it is based in fear of the unknown, fear of other people, complete lack of desire to want to connect with anybody except people that look like you. And that's just not that's just not a way to kind of show up in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with everything that you just said there. Like, it's all based in fear, and the struggle it's all based in fear. But then when it's directed at you,
yes,
right, it's harder than when you hear it on the news or you have discussions with your friends and family about what happened to somebody else. Like, how did you take all that in, especially when you were surprised when you went somewhere and you didn't feel accepted? How did you stay strong, really?
Yeah, well, I go back to my gymnastics, because I was in gymnastics at a time where there were almost nobody that looked like me. I'm tall, I'm Black, and those two things as gymnasts really make you stand out. And so I had always been aware of my differences, of the fact that I could walk into a room or walk in front of a judge, and a judge could score me lower, or bring their own personal bias into whatever routine I was performing. And so I think that's where I developed the resiliency. So by the time I actually became an adult And I got into those situations, and I worked in sports like golf and tennis, where again, there were very few women that looked like me, or very few people. There weren't a whole lot of women in there either. And I had dealt with that for so much of my life that it just felt like more of the same. And so I knew how to handle it. There were definitely times where, I've definitely questioned myself. I've definitely been through those things where you just feel like, is it ever going to actually be easy? Am I ever actually going to get over the hurdles that are just going to be there regardless?
Hey, Jahaan here. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I'm sure you are thinking about your own career right now and how you can pull out in front of the pack to take your career to the next level. For 18 years, supporting women in sports has been my favorite part of my career, and I would love to support you. Whether it's joining my free Game of Her Own community or one of my one-on-one coaching programs, I am here for you. Send me a message at jblake@jahaanblake.com or DM me on Instagram at jahaanblake, and let's schedule a time to have a free session. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, let's get back to why you're here. What I'm hearing you say, and by looking at your resume, but I'll dig in deeper. Like what I'm hearing and seeing is that it didn't stop you.
Right? No, and a lot of that is, my parents. I am very close to my parents. They have such an incredible background themselves. I mean, they both grew up in Alabama. My mother grew up in Birmingham in the 60s. My father grew up in Montgomery in the 60s, and we all know what Black people had to overcome then, and they were smack in the middle of it. I always think about that, and I always talk to them about that, because I have no right to not be anything less than excellent, because everything that they sacrificed and everything that they fought for gave me these opportunities, and I'm very aware of that. So the idea that any single person could come along and knock me down would just be an affront to them, and I can't do that.
Ooh, I just got the chills. That's good. So for anyone who's listening, I was going to ask you what advice would you give, but you just did it, like right there. If I've been, approached by women who are like, I'm so uncomfortable. No one who looks like me is here. This is the first time I'm experiencing this. I don't know what to do. It's getting me down, and all these different things. And what you just said I think is fantastic advice. It's just, well, look back at, if it's not your parents, right? If they're not lucky enough to have parents like yours, it's just looking back in general on Black women and men who have fought so hard to get where we are now, and use that, right? Stand on their shoulders and use that to move forward when you're uncomfortable and when you're not sure how to keep on going, but don't stop. You got to keep going.
100%. That's it.
All right. So I don't have a natural segue for my next question, so I'm just going to go with it. So talk to me about, your superpower, which you call an intrapreneur. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Yes, you did.
Talk a little bit about that. I love that.
Someone recommended, or somebody actually, a friend of mine gave me that term when I was thinking about, we were talking about, well, how would you summarize your career? And, as I said, I've done so many different things in so many different places. I was struggling to find what actually was the connective tissue. And Intrapreneur is basically what I've done for most of my career, which is building new business verticals and new businesses in these really complex, highly matrix organizations. And I've done some of the entrepreneurial piece too with Tennis Channel, but literally everywhere that I've worked was working in a place where we were doing something new. So Fox Sports, when I was at the regional networks, we'd just been a couple of years into that business, and we were the young upstart network. Coming into Comcast, the international sales division had not been around very long. So I kind of came in at the right time there. NBCUniversal, that marketing solutions division didn't exist. I had to create that one from scratch. So that was really fun, kind of thinking about what that looked like. NBA was the same thing, was kind of building this new business vertical. I had to think about what really drives me? What are the things that I really like to do? And I mentioned in the beginning is organizational design and behavior. That's actually what I studied for my master's. And what I love about that is figuring out how groups of people think, how groups of people behave. Because when you build a new business or a new business vertical in an organization, you have to spend so much time gaining buy-in. You have to spend so much time managing stakeholders. You have to spend so much time building and managing teams. And so whatever the discipline is, whether it was marketing or sales or distribution, the common thread for me and the thing I absolutely love and am passionate about is taking a lump of clay and figuring out how to mold it. The teams that support it, the resources that you need, all of those things. It gives me the feeling of being an entrepreneur without actually having to, risk my entire bank account to do it.
Yes. And I know that feeling because I'm on the entrepreneur side. So I know that feeling. So, all right, if you were to give us like a crash course, if someone's listening right now and they're like, yes, that's what I want to do. I'm going to start calling myself an intrapreneur. Like, what are, 2 or 3 things that they should focus on?
Yeah, I think creativity is create your own solution. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these roles kind of developed out of, like, I'll take the Golf Channel role as an example. I was originally selling the E and Style Network catalog. That was my original remit. But then Golf Channel, when it was under Comcast, they were looking to continue to expand internationally. So I was the only person on that sales team that had sports experience. So I put my hand up and I said, I'd love to take a crack at expanding the Golf Channel. Recognizing where there is a need. I mean, that's really what entrepreneurs do, right? Like recognizing when there's a need and building a solution. And don't be shy about pitching. Like, I think we could really use this. Here's the skill set that I have. So that's one thing, is just being very opportunistic and seeing where those opportunities lie. The second thing I will say, and it's probably the most important thing, is understand the importance of stakeholder buy-in, because it's hard enough to manage existing business lines without getting the buy-in of stakeholders. But when something is new and people don't really understand what it is or why it's there, what's the purpose, how are you going to impact my business unit or my business line, then it can create friction. So I probably spent more of my time managing and really building internal stakeholder relationships, because everybody should be a part of your solution. If you just try to do this on your own and just say, hey, here's what I'm here to do, and by the way, good luck to everyone else trying to figure out the rest of your business, that's not how it works. So I treat it like any other relationship. Like, you have to put in the work and you have to realize that you don't know all of the answers. And you need to ask people for their input. I can't state enough how important that is. And then the third piece is just being really clear about your purpose. And so being able to really articulate very well what you're trying to do. Because again, it's something new. It's really hard. If you have to sit down and take a half hour to explain it to someone, it's not going to resonate. You have to be able to say it, hey, here's what I'm here for, here's what I need to do, and here's how you fit into it.
Okay, so working backwards, I'm hearing clear on your purpose, but not in life. That's where I went for a second. But now I was like, yes, that's so important. But that's not what you meant. You meant clear on your purpose when it comes to whatever initiative program that you're working on. Yep. And then stakeholder buy-in. I love that you say, and I'd love for you to talk more about this, you don't have all the answers. You don't, and you need to know that. Like, was that a hard lesson to learn for you?
Yes, very, because I had huge imposter syndrome for, certainly in the beginning of my career. And part of maturing and growing up, and, if I wish I could have learned something 20 years earlier than I actually did, or 10 years earlier than I actually did, it would be that. It would be that being vulnerable and admitting that you don't know everything, or trying to do everything for yourself, and not, delegating or trusting other people to be part of your solution is always a bad decision, because you're then aren't bringing in the best pieces of a solution. Everyone has a diverse point of view. This is the whole point of diversity. Everyone brings in a different skill set, a different point of view, a different way of looking at something, putting something out there. I mean, it's very intimidating to say, hey, here's my plan, put it out there, and then have people rip it apart. But ultimately, that's what you need to do. Because if they don't do it, then the consumer is going to do it. The external buyer is going to do it. Somebody who you really don't want to do it is going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I like the way you framed that. It's like that's a whole point of diversity. Everyone has a diverse like perspective on it. And you want to hear from everybody. I get some of my best ideas from other people, like just talking to them about it and hearing their perspective. I'm like, I wasn't looking at it that way at all. And I totally missed the boat on that. And it's so much better to have that conversation and realize a miss or an opportunity, however you want to look at it, way before you go to market with something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And then the third one was opportunistic, if I got that right. Yeah. Raising your hand and don't be shy when it comes to pitching new ideas.
Yep.
Yes.
Some of the greatest ideas are left on the floor because somebody doesn't come to the table.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you are an intrapreneur. And so how do you, when you're moving from, company to company, how did you ensure that Athletes First Partners would embrace that sort of thinking and that sort of mindset?
Yeah, well, I only came up with the idea like this year. So I didn't really kind of come in pitching that. I mean, the great thing about working at a startup or a smaller company is just by nature, you wear a lot of hats. I was employee number 13 at the Tennis Channel. So, I kind of came in and they said, oh, well, we'd like you to run the programming department. And then they just started throwing stuff, in there like, let's do, sales and traffic fulfillment. Let's do program operations. How about international? So that I think really benefited me in the beginning. So by the time I got to a role like Athletes First Partners, there were so many things, so many directions that we needed to think about and focus on. And it's a really great collaborative team and it's a really great collaborative thought. And so we all bring different skill sets. I mean, there are some fantastic, really fantastic, top-notch salespeople. There are, great marketing solutions leads, client services, and so I was able to kind of fill in where my skill sets lie. And, what I think that's what I was also looking for, was something that I could find that would bring all of those things together. Because the reason I actually was attracted to this job in the first place was because I had spent so much of my time on airplanes and so much of my time in the international business. It does get exhausting. And so my thought or my desire was to kind of pivot to a more strategic role, and also to use the international background that I had, but then also be able to, frankly, be on the ground and not in the air all the time. And that's why I love strategy. That's why I love sort of strategic thinking. And again, organizational design, I think, falls under that. Like, how are we not just having a vision, but then how are we actually going to get it done? Because it takes people and it takes resources to get things done.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
You've given us some really good advice, some really good way of looking at things, but are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Ooh, yes, I think so.
All right. They are really easy. I say that, but then sometimes people get stuck. 12 questions. Say whatever comes to your mind first. Okay. All right. What is your favorite sports moment?
Muhammad Ali lighting this is actually not a sports moment, but Muhammad Ali lighting the Olympic flame in Atlanta.
That's a good one. I think it's a sports moment for sure.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
What is something people always get wrong about you?
My name. People have a lot of difficulty pronouncing my name. So it's just Jené. It's very simple. It's not Jean or Jenny or Gina. But yes, that is the one thing people get wrong all the time.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. Like Jahaan. There's no A at the end. No, where did you get that?
Thanks for adding all those extra,
What is one food you wouldn't want to give up?
Sushi.
Are you a morning or night person?
Morning, extreme morning.
Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving. Bring the family together.
Yes. So you're really good at these. What job would you absolutely be horrible at doing?
Chef. I'm a terrible cook.
What product would you seriously stockpile if you found out they weren't going to make it anymore?
Probably sweats. Well, I mean, especially during the pandemic, but yes.
Sweats. I love it. What is your favorite app?
What app do I have on my phone? My favorite podcast app, Podbean.
Podbean. Oh, okay. Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram?
Instagram.
Who are your biggest inspiration in life?
My parents, for sure.
As a child, what did you wish to become when you grew up?
I wanted to be I didn't know what the word was at the time, but as a criminologist. So I was fascinated with like Encyclopedia Brown, with all of these mystery novels. And I really wanted to be the person that solved crimes.
Oh, all right. Very different career path, but I love that. All right, last one. Finish this sentence. The future of women working in sports is?
Bigger and brighter every day.
Yes, I love it. I love this conversation. I could talk to you forever. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
LinkedIn.
Jené, not Jenny or Jean. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It has been wonderful.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.